Exhausted billionaire CEO discovers incredible connection with Waitress, a hidden love transforms. Mark Thompson stared blankly at the cityscape from his penthouse window, the rain cascading down in a relentless shroud. In the shadows of his enormous wealth, he felt like a ghost, a figure caught in the limelight, endlessly moving yet utterly disconnected. Days became meetings filled with numbers, negotiations over tech patents, and the chatter of voices turned into a dull hum. Nights faded into extravagant parties where laughter masked the hollowness he couldn't escape. He longed for authenticity but found only mirrors reflecting the gilded facade he wore. It was a dreary afternoon when the urge to search for something real finally led him into a tiny diner, a place overshadowed by the towering giants of the tech world. Stepping inside, the heady aroma of fresh coffee and sizzling pancakes offered an unexpected comfort that made him momentarily forget the weight of his empire. The walls were splashed with warm colors, the sound of simple conversations wrapping around him like a welcome embrace. He settled into a booth, clouds of unease dissipating as he slid the menu aside, his mind swirling with thoughts of normalcy. Coffee and a slice of pie. A voice cut through his reverie. Mark looked up, locking eyes with Emily, the waitress whose smile radiated genuine warmth. Her presence was a stark contrast to the calculated interactions he was used to. Her laughter was inviting, and for the first time in years, he felt hope flicker within. Over pie, they shared stories of resilience and dreams. Emily spoke of her daughter with pride, her voice imbued with love and determination. She balanced work and motherhood with an innocent grace, and with every word, Mark felt his guarded heart pull towards her. They uncovered layers of shared values: hard work, loyalty, the significance of family, a tug at the strings of long-buried aspirations. He held back a sob of frustration, recognizing how far his own life had strayed from those roots. But with connection came trepidation. Mark wrestled with the growing fear of revealing his true self, the billionaire behind the curtain. Would honesty bring light to this newfound bond or drown it in shadows? He could almost visualize the life he tried to attain, an empire built on profit and possibility but now crumbling beneath the weight of isolation. The thought of concealing his wealth grated on him, the idea that money could dim the sparkle in Emily's eyes was agonizing. As the rain drummed a steady beat against the diner's glass, the ensuing internal storm of guilt churned in his chest. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. His phone buzzed sharply, drawing him back to his reality. Corporate tensions surged within the walls of his company, a predatory rival scheming to sabotage Emily's diner. An avalanche of dread crashed over him as he recognized the implications. The very haven where his heart began to thaw was at risk. Torn between the echo of his financial responsibilities and the raw, unrefined connection blooming with Emily, Mark faced a horrendous decision. Should he step in and reveal his identity, risking everything he had built? Or should he remain an unseen protector, safeguarding his reputation at the expense of someone whose laughter felt like home? The shadows of uncertainty loomed as he stared out the window, grappling with the cul-de-sac of ambition versus integrity, love versus fear. Just then, a group of shadowy figures appeared at the diner's door, their intentions cloaked in menace. The storm within him surged. This moment held the weight of his soul. Which path would he choose? And would it cost him the love he never anticipated finding? Mark's heart raced as he watched the shadowy figures gather outside the diner. A flurry of alarm coursed through him, underscoring the weight of his decision. Each second felt like an eternity, the clock on the wall ticking down to an unknown fate. He was acutely aware that the sanctuary he had found in Emily's laughter was now threatened by realities he had avoided for too long. He rose abruptly from his booth, the warmth of their shared moments slipping away as he stepped toward the door. A part of him wanted to avoid confrontation, retreat back into the safety of his penthouse, but the very essence of what he had started to discover about himself propelled him onward. What if he did nothing? What if these figures destroyed not only Emily's business but her spirit? The knowledge gnawed at him, a moral imperative demanding action. Once outside, the chilling rain pelted his skin and mingled with the warmth of determination igniting within him. The acrid smell of impending conflict hung in the air as he approached the diner's entrance, his mind racing through all the possibilities of confrontation. Who were they? What did they want? More importantly, what impact would they have on Emily's life, on the fragile connection they had begun to forge? The answers sprawled before him, opaque yet urgent. As he stepped into the diner, Emily's eyes met his, filled with curiosity and concern. In that one glance, he could see she sensed something was amiss. Mark quickly turned his focus to the group, asserting a tense command, "What do you want?" Laughter echoed as one of the figures stepped forward, a smirk cutting across his face. "Relax, billionaire. We're not here for you," the man said, eyes narrowing as he surveyed the room. "Just making sure this little diner doesn't become a thorn in our side." Their intention was clear. Without a second thought, Mark recognized he couldn't allow fear to dictate his actions. This was not just about protecting a business, it was about standing up for someone whose dreams were deeply entwined with the walls of that diner. Mark's resolve hardened. He would cross the invisible line he had drawn around himself, stepping fully into the person he wanted to be, the protector, the ally. "Listen," Mark's voice deepened, carrying the weight of his authority. "I could easily crush your organization from the inside out. Do you really want to make a move here?" The shift in the room was immediate. His confidence was like a shield, blocking the oncoming tide of hostility. Each breath Mark took filled him with not just courage, but self-realization. He was more than a man merely observing life from a distance. He could shape his own narrative. For a brief moment, the figures hesitated, uncertainty playing across their faces. But the leader's bravado resurfaced, fingers twitching as he replied, "You really think you can scare us? This isn't over, Thompson." With that, they retreated, disappearing into the downpour outside, leaving a tense silence in the diner that felt almost like a lull before a storm. Mark's heart pounded, mixing adrenaline with a heavy sense of responsibility. He glanced back at Emily, who stood behind the counter, uncertainty ripped through the genuine warmth of her smile. "Mark, what just happened?" she asked, her voice shaky. He took a deep breath, the adrenaline of battle still coursing through him. "That was a warning shot, and I don't intend to back down. But, Emily, I need to tell you the truth about who I am, about everything." The moment felt monumental, as though the world around him had paused, holding its breath alongside his. This was the turning point of his journey, a leap not only into vulnerability but into the life he genuinely sought. Would his revelation strengthen their connection or unravel the fragile thread that had begun to weave their lives together? Behind the shadows of vulnerability and honesty, Mark sensed potential, the dawning realization that without risk, growth remained impossible. The decision before him now was more significant than just revealing his wealth. It involved unveiling his soul. At that moment, a sudden noise erupted outside, pulling Mark's attention back through the glass. The figures returned, this time with reinforcements, an intimidating array of flashing lights and dark silhouettes that promised conflict. Instinct screamed within him, he would have to defend the love he was realizing he needed. Would he find the strength to protect both Emily and himself as these adversaries closed in, or would fear snuff out the last glimmers of connection he desperately craved? Mark's mind raced, a cacophony of thoughts clamoring for dominance. He couldn't help but see this confrontation as the climax of a struggle that had begun long before the figures had shown up outside the diner. On one hand, he felt the echoes of a life bound by the gilded cage of his wealth, where decisions were often made with calculated distance. And now, standing at the precipice of real emotional risk, he recognized the burgeoning sense of purpose cracking through the facade he had built. The door burst open, and the wet chill swept in with the figures. They carried an air of malice, reflected by the disdainful sneers on their faces. Mark knew he couldn't let fear shape his choices any longer, that his impulses needed recalibration. He turned back to Emily, whose brows knitted in both alarm and confusion. "Stay behind the counter," he managed to instruct, though a flicker of doubt nipped at his resolve. Could he really protect her? The responsibility felt heavier than ever, resting squarely on his shoulders. "Mark, they're dangerous," Emily warned, though her voice held a tremor of admiration, perhaps even a hint of self-doubt. Mark recognized that she saw something in him now, a potential leader forged in adversity. Beneath the chaos, he felt the tension of newfound determination, but it remained fragile, like freshly spun glass. Raising his hand, he flexed his fingers to steady himself. "I won't let them intimidate us," he steadied his voice. Was this raw bravery, or was he clinging to a fleeting moment of boldness? The answer didn't seem to matter. What did matter was the reality that his life choices and his emotions were converging with agonizing clarity. This wasn't just about a diner. It was about the ties he was forming, ties that were as real as any entity he headed in a boardroom. The figures advanced, one stepping forward with an unsettling swagger. "You're brave, Thompson, I'll give you that," he boasted, chest puffed out. "But you have no idea who you're messing with." With a deep breath, Mark steeled himself, visualizing a tapestry of choices woven throughout his past. He had spent too long skirting around meaningful connections, too long crafting his identity in solitude. If he was to step away from the shadows, he had to confront not just them but the lingering doubts that threatened his relationships. "Perhaps it's time for you to learn who you're dealing with." The words blasted out with a force he scarcely recognized as his own. For a fleeting instant, he felt too exposed, both vulnerable and unbreakable all at once. The statement hung in the air like a line drawn in the sand. In the next moment, the leader sneered, spitting words laced with venom, "You really think you can take us down? This is just the beginning." Mark's heart thundered, each beat reminding him that his actions now mattered more than they ever had. He had an obligation not only to Emily but also to himself to reclaim the life he wanted outside the walls of wealth and control, where compassion and connection flourished. One of the reinforcements shifted, ready to charge forward, but Mark's focus sharpened. He wasn't going to back down, he was building courage and resolve. In that split-second decision, he realized he had to prepare for more than just a physical confrontation. He had to equip himself with the tools necessary to protect the essence of what he had discovered about himself in this burgeoning love for Emily. Suddenly, the weight of his entire past, not just the money and suits, but his choices, collided, forcing him to embrace the uncertainty ahead. He could no longer afford to be a passive observer. Mark tightened his grip, readying himself for a head-on clash with not just the men, but the fears that had quieted his voice for far too long. The figures surged forward, but Mark stood firm, a newfound clarity washing over him. Just behind that resolute stance, the uncharted territory of vulnerability beckoned like an open door. Would he muster the fortitude to face them head-on, or would this moment mark a pivotal point in his journey towards embracing love and vulnerability? The rain beat down harder against the diner's windows, a storm both inside and out, a chaos that demanded resolution. Mark's heart raced, pounding in sync with the advancing figures. A primal urge surged through him, a mix of instinct and revelation. In the fray of his emotions, clarity emerged. Fear had no claim on him anymore. The moment, this fragile, chaotic moment, was a proving ground. He recognized that every choice he had avoided throughout his wealthy existence had led him here, confronting not just villains, but his own inadequacies. He shifted his weight, a small but necessary burst of adrenaline coursing through him as he processed the enormity of the situation. The men were a reflection of all he had feared: power misused, bravado over substance. They were the embodiment of the values he had distanced himself from over the course of his climb. As he faced them, he felt the layers of his past peeling away. "Emily," he said, his voice low but steady. "If things go south, get to the back. Call 911. It was a tactical move, but more than that, it was a promise of protection. He wasn't just defending her, he was laying the groundwork for a new identity forged in bravery. Mark. Emily protested, but her voice trembled with an undercurrent of faith in him now. She was seeing him emerging from the remnants of a timid billionaire into something he had barely allowed himself to imagine, someone worth standing up for. The leader of the thugs narrowed his eyes, clearly amused. "What's this? Heroic bravado? You must be desperate if this is the best you can do." A heavy silence enveloped the diner as Mark stood taut, the skeletal framework of his past burrowing into his mind. All those years of isolation, of hiding behind a wall of privilege, camouflaging vulnerability. He was on the verge of a revelation. He had trusted others, but never himself. The oppressive weight of his wealth had stifled genuine connection. Today was different. Today, he could redefine himself. "Desperation," he replied, every word deliberate, "is no longer my driving force. I want to cling to the safety of detachment. I'm ready to conquer my own fears, and that means standing against you." The challenge, like electricity, had now sparked in the air. The thuggish laughter blurred into the background as Mark's focus narrowed, his thoughts racing. He had developed competencies that were invisible to him, the ability to think under pressure, the courage to protect those he valued, the insight to recognize the toxic relationships he had accepted in both business and personal life. "I can see it in you," the leader barked, his bravado faltering. "You're scared." Mark could feel the divide between them expand. The man's bravado crumbled under Mark's emerging conviction. It was as if Mark had uncovered a light that illuminated the darkness of despair. "I'm not scared," he replied, turning the heat on. "I'm no longer running from anything, especially not you." The tension thickened, palpable and electric, pushing him forward. The storm outside raged, complementing the tempest within. Each raindrop against the window seemed to echo Mark's resolve, reminding him that he was not merely fighting for survival, he was fighting for agency, for the life he yearned for, one filled with authenticity, connection, and possibility. But suddenly, a moment of hesitation struck. The leader's cruel smile faltered just briefly, and in that instant, Mark saw a flicker of something: fear? Uncertainty? The thought that maybe it wasn't just him experiencing growth, but others, too, facing the truth of their own choices. The swirling chaos of the diner reflected the whirlpool of thoughts in his mind. Was he really prepared to engage in a dance led by hatred and aggression? He had learned his value not only in wealth but in the connections he fostered. Each moment weighed heavily on him, urging him to act, to push against the boundary that separated the man he once was and the man he aspired to become. The realization struck hard: to run away or to fight? In that instant, he knew that turning away from fear meant a revolution within. Was he ready to fight and unveil the true self hidden beneath the layers of wealth and denial? The course of his life and the choice of who he truly wanted to be was crystallizing, but would he seize this moment or let it slip? Just as the center of the storm seemed to coalesce around him, Mark braced for the confrontation that would define more than his business acumen. The time had come to face not just the intruders, but himself, the duality of his existence thrumming with urgency. Could he withstand the impending clash, and would it finally set him on the path of genuine connection, or dig him deeper into the gilded cage he'd been so desperate to escape? The clang of a plate shattered Mark's concentration, jolting him out of the whirlwind of his thoughts. He turned slightly to see Emily standing frozen, eyes wide with disbelief as chaos unfolded around them. The atmosphere had shifted. Here they were, two souls caught in an unrelenting tide of violence and intimidation. Yet in that moment, Mark felt a renewed sense of purpose swell within him, igniting a fire forged through years of emotional numbness. His posture adjusted. Shoulders squared. He could no longer be the passive observer of his own life. Each fleeting moment had orchestrated an intricate ballet of experience, dressed in fear and disappointment. But now, all those suppressed instincts surged, clamoring to break free. Mark had always replayed moments unfulfilled, especially when it came to confronting truths that loomed larger than any boardroom negotiation. "Get behind me," he commanded, but his voice was not that of a scared man playing at bravery, it echoed with newfound authority. Emily hesitated, her instinct to protect still battling the logic of retreat. He could see the conflict in her eyes, but he needed her to trust him now, more than ever. The leader's mocking laughter rang sharp, slicing through the tension. "How noble! But what's a CEO to these men? You think your title will save you?" In his gut, Mark felt the pinch of doubt, but it was quickly extinguished by a rush of clarity. The wealth he had accumulated over the years had always separated him, creating an insulating barrier from consequences and failures. But now, standing resolutely before these thugs, he understood that vulnerability was a bridge to authentic connection. His self-worth did not hinge on his wealth, but rather on his ability to confront adversity. "I'm not hiding anymore," he declared, a sudden surge of adrenaline pushing him forward. The very act of speaking from a place of sincerity transformed him. Each word was like a chisel, sculpting his newfound purpose from the marble of his identity. Mark focused on the leader, who seemed momentarily rattled by the unexpected assertiveness. "You think intimidation defines power?" Mark pressed, anger melding with conviction. "Real strength is in the choices we make when fear tries to dictate our actions. I refuse to be a pawn in your game." Emily's breath caught at his proclamation. A flicker of pride danced in her expression. It was a moment neither of them had anticipated, but it forged a connection stronger than any he had felt in years. The leader's bravado faltered for just a heartbeat. "You think you can win with some motivational speech?" He sneered, yet there was an unmistakable crack in his confidence. Mark seized on the moment, pressing forward with calculated precision. "It's not about winning. It's about standing my ground. It's about refusing to give in to fear." The atmosphere thickened, each heartbeat echoing with tension, but Mark now held fast to an unshakable resolve. It wasn't merely a confrontation of physicality but a reflection of an internal battle he was finally facing. Every past failure, every choice made under duress, now gracefully aligned into a powerful statement of existence. Mark took a small step forward, eyes locking on the leader. "You may have power through violence, but I will conquer with clarity and courage. And that makes me far more dangerous than you can imagine." The words lingered in the air, challenging the thug's authority. Mark felt emboldened by the recognition of his own strength, redefining the very nature of masculinity he had long struggled against. The simmering undercurrent of change seemed to ripple through the diner, altering the perceptions not only of himself but also the men before him. But as he prepared for the inevitable clash, a dangerous thought crept in. Would his newfound bravery sustain him against a truly violent confrontation, or would it only mask deeper insecurities? The thought of failure lingered, threatening to unravel all he had just found. And as the storm outside raged on, a question burned fiercely in his mind: would he emerge victorious, or still be shackled to the fears he swore to fight against? The very ground felt shaky beneath his feet, and in this uncertain moment, he understood one undeniable truth: the time had come not just for a battle against external threats, but a reckoning with his own limiting beliefs. With a shiver of anticipation, he readied himself for what lay ahead. Would he prove not just to the men before him, but to himself, that courage was a choice he could truly make? The tides had turned, yet the confrontation loomed, every heartbeat amplifying the inevitability of what was to come. Mark's heart raced as he locked eyes with the leader, the reality of the moment dawning on him like the first light of dawn piercing through a troubled night. The atmosphere thrummed with energy, and he was acutely aware of Emily standing just behind him, watching and waiting for the next move. The tension hung thick, almost suffocating, but within it lay the promise of transformation. "You think you can intimidate me?" Mark's voice broke through the haze like a clarion call. It was surprising to hear such defiance spring from his lips, yet it felt like a revelation, a culmination of years of frustration and unfulfilled potential crashing together in the most unexpected confrontation. His stance shifted as he inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of years spent sheltered by privilege beginning to dissipate. He was more than a title, he was a man confronting the reality of his own shortcomings as much as the menace in front of him. Intimidation wouldn't carve his destiny, resistance would define it. Mark's mind calculated quickly. The leader's bravado was like a thin veil hiding a deeper insecurity. Mark's earlier self, the man accustomed to using wealth as armor against the world's cynicism, began to dissolve, replaced instead by a raw, honest vulnerability. He leaned into that awareness here, and now was an opportunity to redefine himself, not just as a businessman but as a human being. You don't need to rely on fear to feel powerful, he continued, his voice steady. Perhaps the real danger lies in the security you think you command. True power is in the ability to lift others, not diminish them. Every word redefined his sense of worth as he spoke, the insecurities no longer paralyzing but propelling him forward. The leader's sneer faltered, giving way to a flicker of uncertainty. With a swift motion, the thugs shifted their stance, and Mark saw a crack that had formed in their misplaced confidence. For the first time, they were not dealing with a corporate CEO who would negotiate away his fear but a man willing to stake everything on integrity and truth. Mark glanced at Emily, who stood transfixed, a swirl of mixed emotions playing on her features. In that fleeting moment, he understood, their shared history, their silent struggles, all tied them together in a way he had never realized before. He felt a rush of affection toward her, recognizing the human connection that went far beyond the dynamics of power and survival. "Step back and reconsider your lives," Mark said with conviction. "Choose a different path. Does violence really define your legacy, or is it time to redefine what it means to be strong?" A silent challenge hovered in the air, both an invitation and a provocation, ushering in a new dynamic to the confrontation. Yet just as the initial shock of awareness began to shift the balance, the leader swung back into aggression, fueled by wounded pride. He raised a fist, ready to strike. Mark's heart pounded, a physical representation of the psychological battle raging inside him. This was not just a clash with men intent on violence, it was a manifestation of his deepest fears confronting the possibility of meaningful change. Mark's transformative journey teetered on the brink. Would the clarity of his newfound identity prove to be a beacon of strength, or would the fear of failure consume him whole? The moment stretched as he prepared to make an irrevocable choice. But just when he thought he might hold his ground, an unexpected sound rippled through the diner, a siren, echoing far away, but drawing closer with each passing moment. Confusion thrummed in the air, sparking a brief, uncertain pause. Mark's breathing quickened again, yet something deeper began to unfurl within him, a flicker of courage ready to catalyze his transformation. Would it be enough to navigate the storm that loomed ahead, or was he about to spiral back into insecurity? As he tilted his head, gauging the reactions around him, another question swirled in his mind: could he truly transform this moment of confrontation into a turning point, not just for himself, but for everyone entangled in the chaos? The siren's wail pierced the tension like a knife. It cut through the bravado and bravely articulated a reality that Mark had skirted for too long. He was not the all-powerful CEO he thought he was. He was just a man standing on the precipice of his own evolution, teetering between fear and the audacity to embrace truth. As the leader hesitated, a blend of anger and confusion swirling on his face, Mark seized the opportunity. A rush of adrenaline coursed through him, sharpening his focus. He considered for a fleeting moment that retreat might be the safer path, a chance to escape this scene unscathed. But instinctively, he understood that succumbing to fear would anchor him to the past. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for the man he wanted to become, for the impact he hoped to have on those around him. "Maybe you don't realize it yet," he declared, his voice resonating with newfound clarity. "But people come into our lives, not to uphold our fears, but to challenge us. I'm here today to stand against everything you embody. It's time you faced yourself." The leader's body twitched, grappling with an amalgam of emotions, anger, pride, fear, all battling for dominance. The thugs shifted almost imperceptibly, drawn by the unexpected strength emanating from Mark. Their leader was faltering, and for the first time, an opening blossomed where there had only been hostility. Mark felt Emily's eyes on him, a steady warmth anchoring his resolve. Their connectedness had grown deeper and more complex through this maelstrom. She had witnessed his fragile self take form, and now stood as a testament to the transformation that was not merely an external confrontation but an internal metamorphosis. Pushing beyond his internal conflict, he took a step forward, asserting control not merely over the physical space but over the narrative of his own life. Being strong doesn't mean tearing others down, it means having the courage to lift them up. Each word rang clearer and more pronounced, resonating not only in the eyes of those present but shaking the very foundations of his past self. Then, more sirens sounded nearby, and he could almost feel the shift in the air, the energy morphing from intimidation to anticipation. He sensed the realization dawn on the leader, recognition flooding his gaze. Was this a manifestation of vulnerability, a sliver of doubt, or an opportunity for him to reconsider? "Walk away now," Mark challenged, his breath steady though his heart thundered in his ears. "Not just from this moment but from all the choices that have defined you." Silence enveloped them, punctuated only by the distant wail of the sirens. Mark felt anticipation entangle with anxiety, knowing that every moment was charged with potential. Yet, the tension could just as easily snap, unraveling everything he had worked to build in this instant. His mind raced visions of boardroom battles where he cashed in favors, manipulations through influence and connections all seemed inconsequential now when placed against the mirror of authenticity. Standing firm, he willed his body and mind into alignment, ready for whatever was to come next. The leader lingered, caught in a limbo of anger and confusion. Mark's courage was a provocation he had not prepared for. The balance hung precariously, teetering on what felt like a knife's edge, and Mark realized this moment this confrontation could redefine everything. Yet, as the leader's hand lowered slightly, Mark suddenly understood that an escape was more complex than just physical flight. Would they walk away from this, or would they choose to face the reckoning of their lives? Would understanding morph into surrender or transformation? Rising action buzzed through the diner, and Mark found himself contemplating the undeniable: the world was shifting, not just outside but also within him. As he stood fortified against the tempest, it became clear, the time had come to face not only his adversaries but his own inner demons. "Make your choice," he challenged, forcing clarity from the chaos around them. But what would that choice reveal about himself and everyone caught in the storm? Would he emerge as a catalyst for change or risk being swept into a deeper turmoil? The air thickened, vibrating with the tension of unresolved decisions. Mark held his breath, feeling the weight of the moment crush against him, forcing the chaos in his mind to settle into clarity. The leader's grip was wavering, a telltale sign that doubt had crept into the fortress of his arrogance. It ignited a spark within Mark, a flicker of hope he hadn't allowed himself to consider before. Why waste this chance? Mark pressed, his voice steady despite the fervor burning inside him. Take a step back and think about the path you're on. If fear governs your decisions, you're already lost. It was a gamble, planting a seed of introspection in someone who thrived on intimidation and power, yet the potential for change glimmered enticingly before him. Emily's presence inched forward in his thoughts. She had been his anchor since this tumultuous journey began. Her unwavering faith in his potential urged him to dismantle the walls of hostility that guarded his own heart. Mark envisioned a world not dictated by control but by understanding and connection. His past clung to him like a shroud, but he had to push through the murky remnants of hesitation. The leader's expression morphed, swirling uncertainty mingling with residual fury. Perhaps behind that facade lay a man originally enamored with ambition, twisted by the ruthless pursuit of power. Most believe strength comes from domination, but I'm beginning to see otherwise, Mark continued, the fervor fueling his courage. True strength lies in the decisions we make and the lives we choose to impact. What kind of legacy will you leave behind? The flicker of hesitation in the leader's eyes ignited a fierce resolve within Mark. This wasn't merely a confrontation, this was a moment of collective truth yearning to erupt. As their gazes locked, Mark experienced a visceral sense of recognition. They were not as different as he had once perceived, both shaped by experiences, punctuated by flaws and fierce ambitions. Then, a sharp noise penetrated his thoughts. The leader's trigger finger tapped against his temple, and for the first time, he appeared vulnerable. What if you're wrong? What if I'm just a product of my choices? He spat, his voice shaky. The admission was a crack in the armor. It was an invitation to explore deeper conflicts raging within them both. Then let us be products of our new choices. Mark exclaimed, his voice an urgent flame dancing against the cold. Each moment is a new opportunity to rewrite our narratives. The past doesn't have to dictate your future. You're standing here at a precipice of transformation. Take the leap. As the sirens grew nearer, their wailing punctuated the charged atmosphere. Mark felt his heart beating in rhythm with the surge of adrenaline. This wasn't merely about control, but a stake in a future that could redefine not only men like him but also that leader, a journey they could embark on together or apart. And then the leader stepped back, uncertainty etched deeply in his features. Mark felt a swell of victory accompanied by a slice of apprehension. What if the leader chose the path of surrender instead of transformation? Would he unravel everything? The diner had shifted into a battleground not just for physical space but for the very soul of men caught at a crossroads. As Mark braced himself for an outcome he could not predict, a thrilling thought anchored within him. His own evolution was waiting, teetering on the edge of discovery. Will you choose differently? Mark said, the clarity resonating from deep within. As those words lingered in the air, a primal instinct rose within him. A decision awaited, one that could unfold into a confrontation of potential or a descent into despair. But with his next breath, Mark discovered the root of his own anxieties. He had to confront the parts of himself he had resisted the most. Because as he stared into this leader's eyes, he realized, could he back down now? Would he emerge stronger or be left with his own reckoning? The moment stretched endlessly, and he sensed the future crackling at the edges. Everything hinged on this exchange, and as the weight of possibility settled upon him, a realization sank in. Change was unavoidable, it was the sole certainty he could cling to. Now, he awaited the decision that would either set him free or bind him tighter than ever before. Would he finally embrace the unknown and become a true architect of his destiny, or would fear claim him once more? Mark's gaze lingered on the leader, the violent flux of emotions swirling like tempestuous waters beneath a forced calm. Doubt knotted in his stomach as he wondered whether his words had seeped deep enough to make a lasting impact. Each second felt like a century, the weight of potential change pressing down on him. The sirens had drawn closer, and Mark felt their urgency mirror his own racing heart. As the leader faltered, Mark seized the moment, sparking a fire of hope within himself. He realized that this wasn't merely about the leader's choices, it was also about his own. The prospect of truly confronting his fears had awakened something he hadn't engaged in years. This was both a test of his courage and a gateway to forge an authentic relationship with his own ambitions and vulnerabilities. Why can't we choose differently together? He asked, his tone softer now, yet unwavering. Mark saw flickers of confusion in the leader's eyes. Every one of us has the power to redefine who we are. Isn't it time we stop letting our past cage us? The leader stared at him, caught in the web Mark had woven with his impassioned plea. Mark's own convictions crystallized in the radiance of their shared vulnerability. He was no longer the same man whose voice quaked under the weight of his own self-doubt. He recognized the path he had walked littered with missteps and achievements, and now, he could articulate his choices with newfound clarity. In that charged atmosphere, doubt danced with possibility. I've once been where you are, Mark continued, his voice barely a whisper. This was a confession, a revelation that could shatter barriers or deepen them, depending on how it was received. I've chased shadows, believing dominance was the only form of success. But now I see strength is found in empathy, in lifting others as we rise. We can exchange our narratives, rewrite them into something beautiful. The leader's eyes flickered with something Mark couldn't immediately decipher. It was curiosity, thankfully not rejection. Almost instinctively, Mark placed his palm against the table, willing his energy to flow like unspent charge into the space between them. The man who had originally seemed untouchable was slowly rearranging his armor. "What if our evolution begins here?" Mark urged. "Instead of fearing each other, we can disrupt this cycle of control. Together, we can build a legacy that lifts others instead of setting them beneath us." As silence enveloped them, Mark's thoughts spiraled deeper. Could he truly establish a foundation based on mutual understanding? The thought ignited an adrenaline rush unlike any he had ever experienced. He had spent so long externalizing his aspirations, but this was a moment where the internal met the external. In this instant, he felt caught between two worlds: the self-defined man he had become and the fractured remnants of his past who hesitated to step forward. He stood at an intersection both formidable and freeing, a dimension of his existence where authenticity lived. And yet, uncertainty loomed ominously ahead. Would this leader embrace the opportunity to evolve alongside him, or would he retreat into the cling of his previous self? The sirens pierced through his reverie again, momentarily jarring him into focus. More than their wailing, Mark felt an internal call, an urge to break free from the expectations he had long masked under bravado. This wasn't just about shifting perspectives, it was a catalyst sparking from within, igniting a commitment to define himself by actions rather than fear-fueled reactions. "Are you man enough to embrace such a shift?" Mark challenged, relinquishing a breath that propelled him forward into an uncharted territory of growth. As he punctuated his question with an unwavering stare, he found himself anticipating the leader's response, every possible answer echoing in his thoughts like an unwritten chapter. Would they walk toward understanding together, or would the walls he was attempting to dismantle rise again, trapping him in uncertainty? But in the depths of that moment, Mark felt the echo of Emily's support resonating within him, a quiet but persistent reminder that perseverance cultivated strength. Now, he awaited this leader's answer as the world around them faded, the only sound remaining being the heartbeat of change reverberating through them both. And thus, in that tension-filled silence looming between them, Mark asked himself, with tremulous hope, would he emerge from this exchange transformed, or would he falter once more at the precipice of his own evolution? Mark took a deep breath, his determination swelling as he stood resolute in the face of uncertainty. Every heartbeat reverberated with purpose, reminding him of how far he had come. The man he had once been cloaked in wealth and isolation faded into the background as the man he was becoming stepped into the light. The leader seemed caught in a whirlwind of confusion and intrigue, his bravado wavered. "You think you can change me with words?" He spat, yet Mark sensed the crack in his hardened exterior. This was at the transformation moment he had been searching for, not only for himself but also for this man who had come to symbolize all the fears Mark had once harbored. "It's not just words," Mark responded with conviction, embodying the strength he had nurtured. "It's about understanding the power of choice, the choice to lift each other rather than tear each other apart. You have a chance to reshape your legacy, just as I do." His voice became a beacon, illuminating a path of possibility where fear had treaded for too long. He glanced back at Emily, who stood witness to this metamorphosis, her eyes filled with hope and belief, fueling him onward. He remembered the warmth of her laughter and the strength he had found in their connection. As the sirens echoed nearer, the leader hesitated again, visibly wrestling with his pride and insecurities. Mark continued to draw on his own journey, the nights spent grappling with loneliness and ambition, the days leading to this poignant confrontation. "Once, I believed power came from dominance," he admitted, his voice steady and sincere. "Now I know it arises from courage, empathy, and the ability to truly connect with others. Let us embrace that together." A flicker of recognition passed through the leader's eyes. Was it guilt? Regret? Something less tangible began to fray the edges of his bravado, and Mark felt an unexpected glimmer of connection form in the shared vulnerability of their circumstances. The air shifted, charged with the awareness that both men faced a choice they could no longer evade. Mark stood steady, each moment enhancing his resolve. You see, we are not defined by our failures, but rather by how we rise from them. This is your moment to step into something greater. Time seemed to elongate, the world around them blurring as the sirens wailed closer. Silence blanketed the diner, and as Mark's heart pounded, he realized it was not just about saving the diner or the love he felt for Emily, it was a battle for a legacy each man could claim. The leader turned slightly, the fight within him echoing the conflict Mark had faced for so long, the choice to cling to familiarity or to embrace change. The weight of that crossroad shimmered between them, fraught with potential for evolution. Mark pressed forward. Your past doesn't have to imprison you. It can inspire you instead. Take this chance to be the person you were meant to be. Each word rang true. This was no longer just a confrontation but an invitation to transform. The leader clenched his fists, his expression hardened, but Mark could see the tension weaving through his demeanor. He was no longer merely a thug but a man faced with genuine fear of the unknown. Walk away, Mark urged, channeling all the conviction he could muster. Choose strength. Create change. The leader took a step back, uncertainty cascading across his features. The predatory bravado dimmed, and Mark held fast to the vision of transformation forming in their hearts. And then, as if sensing the tide turning, the leader overwhelmed the air with a scoffing laugh. You think I'd ever choose that? Yet, the trembling in his voice alluded to a fissure of doubt. For the first time, Mark smiled, not from arrogance, but from the understanding that change was a powerful force. Oh, but you will, he replied, unwavering. This is the moment to reclaim who you are. The sirens are reminding us the world waits for no one. And just like that, the atmosphere shifted once more, light danced where shadows once dwelled. Let us rewrite our legacies, Mark proposed, feeling confidence surge within him. It's time to honor the potential for better choices. It's time to conquer fear. Moments hung in suspended animation, when finally, the leader's resolve faltered. He turned, taking a hesitant step back, a look of introspection finally replacing hostility. Mark's heart filled with unyielding hope. This was the internal battle he fought, not just for himself, but for a humanity that craved connection over conflict, a chance to reclaim a genuine existence. Then, just as the sirens crescendoed, the leader stepped further away and called over his shoulder, "Maybe I was wrong." The words rippled like waves crashing into a new shore. "Yes. That's it," Mark exclaimed, feeling the unmistakable warmth of triumph radiating from deep within. Every moment spent in uncertainty and fear had led to this, the rebirth of two souls ready to break the cyclical chains that had bound them for far too long. "Thank you," Mark whispered, the authenticity pouring from him. "For choosing to evolve." As the sirens rang out in the backdrop of freedom and hope, Mark reached for Emily. Together, they stood fierce against the remnants of their former selves, fully embracing a world where connection and compassion flourished. With unyielding resolve, they stepped forward hand in hand, sowing the seeds of understanding in a place where darkness once had reigned. Through the turmoil of conflict, they had emerged transformed, bravely limited by the hold of their pasts, yet charged with every ounce of the human spirit begging for connection and change. They had not just survived, they had conquered together, forging a legacy that would echo through their hearts for years to come and beyond. Now it is your turn to embrace transformation. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help others discover this journey. Comment your reactions and theories about this incredible ending. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this conclusion. You need to subscribe now and be part of our community of personal growth and inspiration. Don't wait even one more second, share this transformative story.